I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me again today. We've got a great guest on today. Her name is Kalina Silverman. She's a documentary journalist, and she's the creator of this award-winning media project called Big Talk. You can see it on Instagram. She's been doing it for a few years now, and what she does is she has effectively cut out the small talk. She goes around, she interviews people, and she asks them just the tough questions. She asks them deep questions. And the answers are always amazing, and it is incredible to watch all these people sharing their hopes, their dreams, their regrets, and in a sense, bringing community together by doing so. More recently, she's been talking and interviewing some of the people who are caught up in the fire. And so we're talking today about what she's learned about people and community, but also what she's learned about resilience and her own experiences of speaking to people who have lost everything in California. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us, and here she is. Kalina, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's honestly an honor to be talking with you.
I have spent so many hours looking at Make Big Talk, listening to the people that you speak to. And what's so amazing is I'm learning so much about them, but I'm learning, I feel, also about myself. Like, I feel that I'm answering so many of their questions. And if I have a different answer, it makes me think a lot. And I suppose, why don't we start by you explaining exactly what it is for those who haven't looked at it yet? Explain what it is and how you set it up and why you set it up.
Sure. Big Talk is a project I started over 10 years ago now, because I was feeling lonely when I moved to a new city for the first time. And I felt like I was meeting a lot of people pretty frequently, but a lot of conversations were more superficial or fleeting. And one night I was just having a deeper, more philosophical conversation with a friend. And I said, wow, these are the connections I'm craving right now. And he said, yeah, screw small talk. So the idea for the name Big Talk popped into my mind. And I was studying broadcast journalism at the time. And so the following summer, I did a couple of documentary projects where I was in Germany and Ecuador for just a few weeks at a time. And that's when I learned you have to cut the small talk in order to connect with people, share their stories when you only have a limited amount of time. And as a result, the connections became so much deeper and more meaningful. And on my last day in Germany, I saw a question written on the Berlin Wall, and it said, what do you want to do before you die? And I thought, that's big talk. That's the ultimate big talk question. I came back to Los Angeles and decided to try a little experiment where I approached strangers on the street and skipped the small talk to ask them, what do you want to do before you die? And I talked to people from all walks of life. It didn't matter if it was a businessman in Beverly Hills or someone experiencing homelessness in Venice Beach or a child or an elderly person. Everyone had an answer. And what it came down to, what mattered most to people were their relationships. And that profoundly changed the way I live my life after that. And I shared this video. This was pre-TikTok, Instagram days. I shared it to YouTube. And soon I started receiving messages from people all over the world who wrote to me and said, I want to join the Big Talk movement. And I thought, wow, this could be more than a one-time video project. This is actually a way of communicating and relating to others. So after that, I applied for a Fulbright research grant to go to Singapore and research ways to use Big Talk to build empathy across different cultures. And I tested out Big Talk questions with Singaporeans, expats, migrant workers, and found questions that everyone could relate to. And those are the questions that I use today in my videos when I still, to this day, walk up to strangers on the street and skip the small talk to have more meaningful relationships with them.
Yeah, I've got so many questions about a lot of the things you just said. I mean, first of all, do you feel, first of all, that there has been a change in our society, that people are moving away from big talk, that perhaps, I don't know if I would say the youth of today aren't interacting on the same level? And do you think that that's something which could be a concern?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a few years ago in the UK, they elected a minister for loneliness. That's a real job title. And I know Japan did the same. And the US Surgeon General also released a report on loneliness. And I think his parting prescription for America that he just released was community. That was his prescription for the United States. And I think the youth of today I mean, really simply, and I'm not the first one to say this, but due to technology, it's a lot easier to choose the quick thing and grab your phone to connect with people than have face to face relationships. Building face to face connections can be a slower process. It can sometimes feel a little awkward or scary. So, of course, younger people are going to choose the easier thing first if they're not guided in the right direction.
And in some sense, what you're doing is pushing back against that, using the same tech, using social media
Exactly.
to do that, which I love.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of ironic, right? That I'm using social media to encourage face to face connection.
Mm. All right, of all the people you've spoken to, I mean, you must have heard so many different answers, but I wonder if you notice, say, a real difference between, say, how young people answer versus how old people answer.
Mm. It's funny because I can ask the same question to an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, and sometimes the answers are profoundly different, and sometimes they're very similar. But when I ask the question, for example, what do you want to do before you die? Younger people will have all sorts of aspirational answers, like I'm going to climb Mount Everest and travel the Appalachian Trail, and things that are very outward looking. When I talk to older people, a lot of them will just say things as simple as have more good days, just enjoy more good days with my family. So there's differences in that regard. But it's pretty awesome when you hear, a 6-year-old and an 80-year-old both say things like, what's most important in life is caring for our earth right now. Things like that, people will connect across generations, across different walks of life.
How about around the world? Because you said you were in Singapore,
Yeah.
part of a Fulbright scholarship. Were there different answers on the other side of the world, or were there real similarities? How did that change?
Sometimes it's how you phrase a question and how someone answers it, but the sentiment is always the same. What matters most to people is usually building a good life for their family, and then cherishing the moments with their family. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
I mean, you listen to all these different people, and I suppose, it must have taught you an awful lot. And I suppose, what has it taught you most about life? In what ways has it changed your own view on life and your own life? Because I imagine you set this up because you believe in community already. I mean, I can tell that from your videos.
Yeah.
Do you feel, was there a fear that not enough people believed in community when you started this? And have you been quite surprised that, in fact, most people actually do, that we shouldn't be that worried?
Yeah, I believe that we might be misguided to think, based on what we see in the news or media or attention on celebrities, that people don't care anymore. But through this grassroots effort of Big Talk, I know that humans are innately good and people care for each other. Even in just these videos I've recently shared regarding the LA fire, so many people around the world are rallying behind complete strangers simply because they're connecting with them face to face. I mean, virtually, I'm connecting with them in person face to face, but it's kind of a tool for sharing that feeling of connection. And by connecting with people face to face, seeing the emotion on their face, hearing their direct stories, it's not about their opinions. It's not about facts. It's just about people's direct experiences. People will connect with each other and want to help one another. And I think that's how we heal our country, our world, is through mutual support on the ground in a grassroots way.
You say heal our country. Do you think that it is broken at the moment?
It's a big question. I think there are parts of our country that are really hurting. I mean, that's no secret. You hear it all the time from people face to face and in the media. I think a lot of people are hurting and feeling disconnected, feeling confused, feeling helpless. And sometimes, when I'm just scrolling through social media, I feel the same way. But when I actually talk to people face to face, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle they stand on. I can connect with them on a human level. And that feels like I'm repairing, in a sense, some of the fissures in our society. And when people watch these interviews, they feel connected to them too, no matter what side of the aisle they stand on either.
Yeah, it's such a clear reminder of how sort of bad social media can be, because often it just cuts out everything that is positive. It's just feeding you the one thing you believe in. Whereas what you do is you go and talk to people and you realize that even if you differ politically, perhaps you share so many things on so many other levels. And that's what's so important.
More of our conversation right after this.
I suppose when you mentioned the fires, first of all, what it was like for you to be in the middle of it. And I imagine for the first time be interviewing people who had lost everything. And some of your videos like Walt and are so powerful. These are people who are amazing, have lost absolutely everything. So what it's been like to take Big Talk into, frankly, a huge disaster
Yeah.
and get the results. And also what that has then taught you about resilience.
Yeah, totally. For the past 2 years, I've been walking up to strangers on the street in a very casual way and making Big Talk with them. But this has been the first opportunity where I've really been able to apply Big Talk to a disaster. And 9 days ago now, I was on a walk with my mother and we saw the fires blazing across the Pacific Palisades with our own eyes. And there was just a crowd of us standing there staring in disbelief. It was this very collective communal moment, actually, where everyone, all our neighbors were talking to one another. I met more people then than I did in years of growing up at my mother's house. And everyone was pretty helpless. People were filming on their phones and receiving evacuation notices. I met so many people who had just evacuated from the Palisades, and I had no idea that they all had lost their homes at that point. It was chaos. The next day, we were all told to evacuate or stay indoors, and I was just watching the news helplessly. And at that point, I kind of regretted not going into broadcast journalism originally because I was seeing all these reporters and I wanted to be on the ground helping as well. And had a sleepless night. And then the next morning, I just had an aha moment and I reached out to the marketing director at GoFundMe, which is a fundraising platform for people in need. And I said, hey, what if I go out and talk to people who've lost everything in the fire and share their stories and try to amplify their fundraisers? And she said, great, let's do it. And she sent me a list of verified fundraisers on GoFundMe. There's about 10 on the list at the time. I reached out to every single one. And by the afternoon, I had scheduled an interview with Walt. And I went to go meet Walt in Pasadena, where he was sheltering just a day after losing his home in the Eaton fire in Altadena. And he immediately broke down crying, telling me about how he lost his home and he didn't understand because he spent his whole life helping others. He said he grew up without shoes and he eventually came to have a shoe store and he would give out free shoes to people in need as well. And I shared that video. It took me like 4 hours to edit. I went home and I posted it late at night, not knowing, what could come from it. By the next morning, it had raised $100,000 for Walt. And by the end of the weekend, almost $1 million. And after that, I didn't need GoFundMe to send me a list of verified fundraisers because I started receiving so many emails and messages from other people who wanted their stories told. And so for the past week, I've just been driving around LA in my little dented Subaru, like reaching out to fire victims, meeting them, filming them, just alone, just on my iPhone. There's no fancy equipment. I just film them, hear their stories, go back, edit them, and post them. And each time I post a story of a fire victim, there's an immediate response. People start commenting, donating. People have shared it all over the world. One of the stories, someone on Anderson Cooper's team saw it, and then they ended up interviewing him on Anderson Cooper that night. Another man who's paraplegic and was a former athlete that I featured, someone from the LA Rams football team is reaching out to him now. So it's really cool to see this ripple effect of people who want to help complete strangers just because they saw their story.
Yeah. And I suppose more than that, I mean, you set up Big Talk just to get people to think about loneliness, but and to interact and get to know more about community. But what you have suddenly created is a way of actively improving and changing people's lives who had lost everything. And I wonder what that feels, that you found yourself in a position where you can give that sort of support, and the work you have done is actually putting the roof over people who have lost their homes, giving them back what they have lost. And I imagine that must be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my head around that. I never thought of myself as an activist, just as a storyteller. And I never thought of myself as someone who could help people financially, because that's not something I personally am able to give, given my own circumstances. So it's cool to see that people can come together and help people. Like Big Talk has like a few 100,000 followers now. Like if each one of those people just donated $1, someone could raise $300,000 for themselves. It's really cool. It's really about the power of collective humanity. And my mind is kind of blown. I'm trying to figure out what to do next, like after things have started to calm down a bit from the disaster of the fires. I want to continue to do this kind of work. So that's something I want to reflect on. I, of course, want to continue to share these organic conversations I have with people in my neighborhood, but I also want to be more pointed with my interactions in the future and continue to help people in any way I can.
Yeah, before the fires, then what was the goal? And I know you ask many of the people on there what their goal is or what they're building towards. So
Yeah.
what was your goal before the fires? Where did you want to take Big Talk?
I feel over the past 10 years, it's really been about just growing this movement of encouraging and inspiring people to connect with one another face to face and rebuild their communities. And so there wasn't really an end goal. There's personal, professional goals. Like my dream is to have a Big Talk mini series that goes beyond social media and maybe can reach mass audiences on television networks or through other streaming services. Like that's a professional goal for Big Talk, keep reaching more people and sharing these stories and add some positivity to a lot of the noise that's out there. But on a Big Talk level, the goal is just to keep helping people feel less alone.
Yeah.
As simple as that, or as complicated as that.
I mean, it's perfect. I wish more people would have just such simple and wonderful ideas as well. What about resilience? I mean, you have seen people, as you said, Walt and many others who lost everything. Did you see a wide variety? Did you see some people who didn't think they could build it back up? And then did you see some people who felt absolutely that they could? I spent a lot of time myself. The podcast was set up to look at resilience. Why do some people have the ability to say, yeah, I've been knocked down, I've lost everything, but no problem, I will build it back up. And other people say, I can't do it anymore, I'm broken and I'm lost. And I don't know, what did you see about the people you met? Did you see both?
Yeah, I have seen so much resilience in the people I've interviewed, and not just due to them losing their homes in their fires. I talked to a man who a year ago became paralyzed in a drive-by shooting, and his mom died at that same time, and now his father is dying. So he already struggled so much, and now the fires are happening on top of that. And he still says, you've got to move on. He said, it's like quicksand. You have to keep fighting, even if you're falling. I talked to a woman yesterday before the fires. She has 4 kids. One is adopted and disabled. She was divorced. She recovered from alcoholism. And then the fires happened. There's so many stories like that. I talked to Judge Reed yesterday, who has lost 3 out of his 5 of his sons, one to a homicide, one to an illness, and one to a car accident. So people have already struggled so much and come out of it. And I think that has added on to their resilience. I, of course, talked to others who feel a little hopeless, but no one has said I'm giving up. No one has just checked out. Every single person, I mean, just by the fact that they want to share their story shows that they're resilient and open to being vulnerable and open to asking for help. And I think that's what it comes down to. Resilience is not just about having this inward strength. It's about being willing to let others help you.
Yeah. I mean, some of those stories, and I've seen those videos as well.
Yeah.
Again, it makes it so difficult because we're talking about resilience, but then so many people you meet have such tragic stories as well. And that reminds you of the cracks we were talking about earlier in society. It just feels like such a divided world sometimes. And I suppose Big Talk hopefully tries to mend some of those cracks. So is there something that you've heard many people say that makes you feel sad, perhaps, more often than not, that you weren't expecting to hear so often?
Yeah. For some reason over the past year, when I've asked people what's been the most difficult experience of your life and how did you get through it, a lot of people have talked about losing their fathers. And that has been surprising to me and heartbreaking. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what that's related to, but that's been heartbreaking for me. And, not
family,
just elderly people, just younger people. Yeah. It's like, because that's not something I can fix, people losing their family. That's something we'll all have to face one day. But I think at least sharing their story helps in the grief process. A man I interviewed yesterday, he said time doesn't heal wounds, but it does help moderate them. And I thought that was a really honest way of stating that, that grief, it'll never completely go away, but you can moderate it and help it heal through sharing stories and through time and processing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder, how much good it does for all the people, all the videos you do, because so often people don't don't say any of these things out loud. They keep them inside. And I imagine that must be great for them for you to ask these questions and for once for them to say it out loud. Have you seen the benefit it has given to the people you interview?
Yeah. Walt, the man who went viral with his video, his son, after seeing the video, said, "I've never even seen my dad cry before." And I was so surprised because his dad cried 3 separate times during that interview. And other people commented that too. And they said, "Wow, Walt Butler, I've never seen you emotional before," you know? And all I did was ask a few questions. And I think something about asking these universal questions that are very human helps people let their guard down and open up emotionally. And maybe it's because I'm a stranger. It's easier to open up to a stranger sometimes than perhaps someone you know, where you've already want to project a certain version of yourself to them based on what they know of you. So I do think it is healing. When I interview people for Big Talk, many people often say, "Well, I've never answered that question before." There's probably many of the Big Talk questions that I ask I've never even answered before. And they're so simple.
Yeah. To finish up, I suppose, what is the one thing that you have learned more than anything else during these interviews, as well as perhaps during the fires? And for people listening right now, you know, what would you like them to really learn from what you've done and from the videos you do?
If you feel inclined to talk to someone, just do it. There was a study called Mistakenly Seeking Solitude by Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago, that people think that people don't want to talk to one another on trains, so no one talks to each other. But once they actually start a conversation, everyone's happier because of it. So next time you're walking around your own community and looking down or feeling on edge or have a sour expression on your face, try to just look up, look away from your phone, smile, and be open to connections that are possible. It could be just people you say hi to on the street, small business owners, but just start feeling more open to one another and recognizing that we're all universally the same.
Yeah, you feel it all the time when you walk around and you see people lost in their phones. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I do worry that people don't interact as much. And I think that's what your work, what Big Talk does, makes people interact. And I think that's probably just the greatest thing that people can start doing. So thank you so much for being on. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for all the videos. And for anyone who wants to help, where can they go? So what's the best thing? Say that the people that you've put on from the fires, how can they help them?
Yes. So if you want to help some of the people who lost their homes in the fires, you can go to my Instagram, which is @MakeBigTalk. And the link in the bio will link to the GoFundMes of fire victims. I also have a website, makebigtalk.com, and they will be linked in the news section of my website.
And I can say that we've also bought the cards and all the questions that you have. So they're coming to my house soon, and my family is going to sit around and we're going to ask each other some of those difficult questions. And I know it's going to be a great experience. Well, great, I don't know, but it's going to make us talk, which is wonderful. Kalina, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and keep doing what you do.
Thank you so much for hosting me and helping me to share my story and the stories of the fire victims. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining again today. And please go and check out Kalina's Instagram account. I just think in many ways it is the future of how people interact. And we talk a lot about the negatives of social media. We talk about how society is cracked. But then you talk to Kalina and you realize that social media can do incredible things. It can bring people together. And it also shows that although there are cracks in society, it can be used to help fix those. So thanks for joining us today. And again, you know, it's also shown that Kalina and the work she does and the work other people do is a great way of raising money for those who have been hurt or whose houses have been lost during these fires. And so it was, for me, a great interview. And if you have a chance, go look at all her videos. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.